So guys, today I wanted to properly show a little bit, not by much, but a little bit, why the platform that you are firing the missile is sometimes the main thing about the missile performance itself, okay? So how the performance of an aircraft in a simple term of acceleration and climb speed would completely change the performance of a missile, and sometimes an aircraft that has the same missile as another will have a completely different behavior on BVR, for example. The objective here is to try to explain, for example, that even though, for example, the F-18C will receive the AIM-120C5, it will have a completely different performance on the missile compared to the Eurofighter, for example, okay? So we're gonna show it in StatShark, and then after that, we're gonna show it a little bit on kind of a live test on War Thunder, okay? So just to show the theory behind it, before we go to the actual test, I'm just gonna basically explain to you here. For example, if we have an AIM-120B over here, okay? A normal missile that is commonly used by many nations, right? If I launch it from, I don't know, 10 kilometer, altitude against the 10 kilometer target at 1,200 kilometers per hour, at a target that it's flying the same speed in around a 50 kilometer launch. That would be the max range that you see normally on an actual game, right? If you launch that missile, you will notice some stuff, right? The missile will do its loft and it will hit the target at 44 seconds at around a travel distance of 35 kilometers, right? But imagine that this is, for example, an F-18. What if this was the Eurofighter that can go to, I don't know, 1,700 kilometers per hour, and you do the same test, the same exact test? You will see that, of course, it will hit before, by much, maybe not. It even hits around the same distance sometimes, but in a general sense, it would actually hit first, right? So, because the actual, speed of the aircraft is helping the missile. And another thing that you have to consider is the speed that the missile actually hits. So, for example, here, Mach 2.28. So it's a very fast missile that can get a maneuvering target even at a 50 kilometer shot. If it was at around 1,200, it would mean that the missile would hit it with 0.2 Mach less, a little bit less energy. So it matters the platform that you have on speed. But not only that, guys. Imagine that maybe it's not only the speed, but the actual distance. Or the altitude, sorry. So imagine that it's the same target, but imagine that the target that you were in a lower altitude over here, we wasn't able to actually get to the 10,000 meters, and you would still have a lower airspeed. That creates a whole new problem as well, making the missile, when it actually hits, have a lot less speed. Look at this, almost a whole Mach number below. It would have around 10 seconds more than the Eurofighter at 10 kilometers. So you can see that this basically makes the missile be good or not. The platform itself, and that's why you see such different options or different performances according to the missiles. For example, if we compare, let me show the last example that I will show here in StatShark before we go to the game. If we compare the AIM-120C5 to the R-77, if you put them in the exact same parameters over here, they will be very similar missiles. We already tested that on the dive server that will be added. See, they are very, very, very similar to each other. They changed the way that the loft of the AIM-120 is right now. You will see very similar speeds. I mean, at the lower, at the touchdown over here, it's almost the same speed, at the almost the same exact time, at almost the same exact distance, done. So the R-77 is still a little bit better, but not by much, So they are very similar missiles. But think about this in another way. Imagine that the R-77 is fired from an aircraft that is like the Su-30, of course, at this speed, but in a much lower altitude, in the same target. It would mean that this missile would have a lot more troubles. It would hit the target at Mach 1.34, so it's a very, very, very low maneuvering missile already, and a very low speed flying missile, right? If you do this with the M120, which would be the main thing over here, oh, not C6, C5 without the R77 at the proper speed, you know, at the proper altitude, it would mean that the missile would do what we saw before. More than 10 seconds sometimes of an earlier hit, almost twice the speed, so everything is better. And of course, this is obvious for a lot of the veteran players, but sometimes it isn't for the new players, and the objective of the video is for the new players, guys. So, although yes, for example, the Su-30SM has, you know, the same missile as the M120C5, since it is so much slower than the Eurofighter, it means that the Eurofighter will be a better BVR weapon, even if the missile is worse. You know what I mean? This can even make, for example, the the M120A or B become better than the R77-1, or the R77-1 become even better, or normal R77-1, like the normal one, R77 become better than an M120C5. It all comes down to the platform. A great example over here would be the Mika. The Mika, man, it's an incredible missile, and the aircraft itself over here, it is one of the greatest aircraft in the game, if not the greatest. We already talked about this. It can clearly get, the Rafale can get to those speeds and those altitudes, right? If we calculate something like this with the Mika, it would mean that it would hit a target faster and with more speed than the M120C5, coming from a lower altitude and a lower airspeeds. So the Rafale basically makes the Mika be better than M120C5 if the C5 is being launched from a platform that it's lower and lower. So see how much difference we have here? Because the Mika, if you don't know, it is a much worse missile for BVR than M120C5, for example. So it is very interesting to see this just for the sake of platform. Think about the platform. What platform can, at the early stages of the matches, get to the higher altitudes or not? Or the higher speeds or not. So let's show this a little bit on a game, a little bit. And as you're gonna see in this test that we did, we tried to fire with the R77-1 and the M120B, which is a way worse missile than the R77-1 in a general sense, but using the Eurofighter against the Su-30SM. The Eurofighter is a way better platform on the terms of BVR shooting, right? And if you really noticed, you will see that the missile itself, in a general sense, it's a lot better. The M120B becomes better. You know, it's kind of weird, but the R77-1 is a better missile. But once they're firing different platforms, because they are using different speeds and different altitudes, I mean, the Eurofighter was shooting at Mach 1.3 plus, at around 14,000 meters, while the Su-30SM, I could not make it work with the 50-kilometer range to try to climb it more. You know, it was kind of using a realistic kind of scenario of 50-kilometer shot in this kind of situation. And the maximum that I did with the Su-30 was around what? 13,000 meters, something like that, at around Mach 1, right? So it's a lot less altitude and a lot less speed. Meaning that at the end of the day, look at these speeds at the very late stages of the missile burn, of the missiles, you know, flying. The M120 has a lot more energy and it hits the target a lot quicker. So at the end of the day, the platform dictates everything, guys. So basically this is it. We have our point, right? If you have the correct platform, if you have a better aircraft, even if you use a worse missile, it can become better in a launch parameter just because you can put that missile in the right window. The Mika is the perfect example. The problem with the Mika is that it loses so much speed in the long term that even that, it's kind of hard to prove that point, you know? But it will feel like it is a way different missile. If you fly with the Mirage and then fly with the Rafale, it's like it's a different Mika, but it's the same missile. It's just that the performance of the Rafale is much, much higher, right? So you get to those altitudes and speeds in the window of a game to actually make that shot count, right? So yeah, that's kind of it. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye guys, see ya.